Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Obituary, Season 1, Episode 4. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I love that opening because it seems so out of context. You're like, what is this storyline? What is it all about? Did not expect them to weave it around into becoming so relevant. I was like, when the twist is revealed, of like, oh my god, that's amazing. Because it's like I said, it just because we at the time don't know who those characters are. We don't know that that's a young Tom and his dad, and we definitely did not know that that was a young Ward. I love that reveal because I'm so sporadic throughout watching these episodes that I completely forgot Elvira's dad's first name. So it wasn't until the bar when Ward is talking to some, not at the bar, but at the funeral, or at least after like the funeral or whatever, they're at the bar or whatever, and people said Ward's name. I was like, oh my god, if I hadn't heard that background dialogue say his name Ward, I probably wouldn't have remembered his actual name as Ward, and it would have that name Ward in 93 never would have made sense to me. It's like, oh, but I dude, still, that is just wild. Okay, so I'm jumping all over the place. I do apologize. Let's kind of break it down. I think it's a really interesting overarching theme in this episode about forgiveness. I think it's so interesting because Elvira has a very black and white stance of, no, when you do something terrible, so what if he did his time? He got 10 years. He only served 7 because he got out good for either got parole or early released for good behavior, whatever the case may be. I mean, to be fair, she enjoys killing people, so she just needs an excuse. So it's like, okay, going by the rules of my thing of it has to be a very bad person. Well, let me just. I mean, once again, it's like the lady she killed that was robbing people. It's like, yeah, she did something shitty, but is it like, does she deserve to be murdered for it? It's like, no, she doesn't. So it's her rules are wonky. Once again, it's just easy justifications to try and justify it because once again, she doesn't view what she does as evil. It's like, no, I'm getting rid of bad people, so it's fine. It's justifiable, even though it's not. But she's going after George because it turns out George hit a father and daughter. They both died because he was drunk driving, and he got out of prison, and Elvira's got this very hard stance of, well, he doesn't deserve forgiveness, whereas her father, as well as so many other people around her, have the opposite of belief, especially Ward being like, yeah, but I think people deserve forgiveness or whatever. It shouldn't, basically, yeah, you get drunk, you're not in your best faculties, you shouldn't let that define you. And Elvira was so disappointed in her dad having that perspective. And it's just like, yeah, you go ahead and do whatever you want to. He's like, I'm not an expert on this or whatever. She's like, yeah, you're definitely not. I was like, but the funny thing is he is. Because once again, it's just these moments that we know, but Elvira doesn't know. It's like, right, when her dad's saying that about George, he's also substituting you in because he knows you did something and he's protected you all these years and you just don't remember it. So, and he continues to protect her, and he's also, because that's also doubly sad because we know she's the reason why he drinks too, to compensate for the terrible thing that he did. It's like, oh, you did this thing and I covered it up. I let you get away with murder. It's like, I'm a parent protecting my child. You're the only thing in this world I have. I've always loved you and I will continue to love you despite all that you do. It's like, he has a decent enough normal relationship with her, but he's still, to function, he has to drink. So it's not, who is he around Elvira when he's not drinking, I think we've gotten peeks into it, but not really. Most times he's around his daughter, he's drinking, but I don't think Elvira's put 2 and 2 together. But either way, to be fair, he's out and about drunk too, but I think it's probably just to be okay to drown out the thoughts and the ghosts that are haunting him, he needs to be drunk. But it's just, like I said, it's just, we as the audience recognize the irony behind what Ward is saying, and it's going over Elvira's head because it doesn't mean anything to her. So it's it is that she's all about oh, you did something terrible, you should be punished for it, but she doesn't recognize the irony behind her killing people. Plus, she did something to Maria. She potentially is the one who killed Maria. Like I said, not unless there's some last minute twist where she's not the one, but we'll find out. It feels like it's not going to be a red herring. It feels like, no, she definitely did. But I'm leaving room in my head with some of the developments at the end of the episode to kind of leave room open to be like, no, she didn't do it, but she got blamed for it or framed for it, and Ward just basically helped cover up someone else's crime because he thought he was helping cover up his daughter's crime. But either way, obviously Elvira does what she does, where she tries to keep an eye on the person, and it's like, right, let's find out whether or not they deserve to die. So first she's kind of trying to get his pattern out, and it's like every so often for like over half an hour he'll go for a run. Well, she also goes to visit his therapist, which is obviously, she could have come up with some BS, but it's probably a small town where everyone knows everyone. She still talked about it, so her therapist definitely didn't know about her circumstances. But I mean, that's the easiest thing to kind of get the information she needs. She's going to be vulnerable because she doesn't think much of it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be honest about this. It's not going to be anything. So she used her own personal trauma of like, yeah, my mom died when I was born, and dealing with it so late in life, and basically she was using it as an opportunity to try and get an answer out of the therapist how she felt about George, the man who did a hit and run. He was drunk and killed your husband and child. How do you feel about that? And she moved it away from her and focused on Elvira. And it's like, right, I want you to tell me, like, what's one of your happy moments from childhood? The first one that comes to mind. And Elvira couldn't think of one. And it's like, right, this is going to be your homework. And I love that in the process of doing her thing of trying to kill George, she actually, it wasn't till like partway through it that she was like, oh, wait, her first memory was like, the first thing that came to her mind when she was happy wasn't necessarily shooting the bottles. I think it's specifically the deer situation, seeing it dying and stuff, that she was almost elated. She was so ecstatic about it. So it is ironic that in the process of trying to kill a dude, it reminded you, because what triggered a memory was she shot at him with the nail gun, missed, and then she like, oh, missed. It made her remember she missed the final bottle when she was out there shooting with Ward. It ended up hitting the deer. So that's what triggered that. So now in the process of murdering a dude, you remembered what is essentially your happiest memory, which is kind of tied to murder. But I mean, it's more so specifically tied to death that you are responsible for, regardless of it being unintentional, but still. But yeah, I love that whole sequence too, because George was like, oh, can you actually operate that? She's like, yes, sexist bastard. But actually, yeah, he is right. This thing is actually hard because it's a modified nail gun, and it's, I think, high powered, but it's just like, it's been modified, so it's not the easiest thing to figure out. And just constantly shooting at him, which I'm like, that's not going to play into your whole this was an accident thing, or how are you going to, like, to be fair, it's all like thrown out the window because George saw you, so you hadn't really crafted how you were going to kill him and make it look like an accident or whatever, or whether or not you want to set it up to be another suicide situation. But at the very least, you weren't prepared for this, so you're flying by the seat of your pants. But I'm like, how are you going to like cover up all of this? Because first and foremost, you're leaving all this evidence behind. There's a whole bunch of nails stuck in trees and all over the place. So I'm like, someone might place that together to be like, oh, someone actually murdered this dude. At least your other crimes you were able to cover up to make them look like accidents or suicide, right? But what was interesting, though, is George got the upper hand on her, and rather than shooting her, he didn't. He just shot the tree next to her, threw down the nail gun, and ran away. And I think for Elvira, she should have taken that as a sign of like, right, this guy he had you dead to rights. He could have killed you, and he would have been right to, because it was self-defense. But Elvira was so caught up in what she wanted, it didn't matter. So when it was all said and done, though, he sadly got hit, ironically enough, by a drunk driver. And so luckily, I think Elvira was so far off to the side that the driver didn't see her. And she goes, oh, I should be happy about this, but why am I not getting anything out of it? I was like, well, to be fair, you didn't like set it up to kill him. Like, once again, it's like, you're weird about it, where it's like, oh, someone dies, the lady that died, and you try to like save her by bringing her back to life after she had like a heart attack or whatever. Or her heart finally gave out because you needed to be the one to kill her. And I guess it's like, well, you were chasing him down in this situation, and he I guess the rules are different because, like I said, it wasn't a plan. It wasn't going by the plan anymore. You were just like flying by the seat of your pants. So him getting hit by a car, I thought that would have taken away from it, like her dropping dead in the middle of a store did for you. But once again, I think that's just supposed to be more transparency of how Elvira is just like flippant with her rules, once again, because it's not solid foundational rules. They're just flimsy justifications she tries to give herself for all of it. So she also finds out, she ends up going to his brother Leonard, and tries to, learn more about him. It's like, all right, say all the stuff I need for the obituary. And it's like, actually, my brother was a good guy. He actually gave me a kidney. And it's like, okay, interesting. And so it's like, oh, can you write a speech? Basically, take it from the perspective of someone you love, that you care about, died, and and in this case, she was writing if it was like Mal that died. But before he could even read his speech at the funeral, because she was actually happy, she was like, oh man, it might be some of my best work. The therapist burst in and she apologized. Well, she ends up saying she forgives George. And you're like, and Elvira's the only one. Like, everyone else stands up and clapping. Elvira's like, no, sit down, you idiots. Why are we believing this horse shit? It's like, no, you don't. Wait, you what? You can't. And she's saying, rest in peace, George. It's like, there's no way you feel that way. And so I love that she goes to see her later on, and it turns out the whole thing was horseshit. It's like, because she's like, oh, Elvira, you write people's obituaries, so you go to see the loved ones and stuff. Here, why don't you hand out my business cards? I was like, first and foremost, that's super unprofessional for you to do that, to be like, yeah, like, oh, before we begin our session, how about you hand out my business cards? It's kind of a 2-for-1 thing of like, you're going there to help people grieving through something, to write something about the obituary. I can actually help with the grieving process. And then for Elvira, it's like, the whole thing was horseshit. You didn't actually forgive him. Actually, business has actually been better because of that whole thing. And she's like, right, to be fair, I can now help more people who are out there. So much like Elvira, she's trying to have some flimsy justification for it. But it's like, for her, George's funeral was the happiest day of her life. But a couple scenes earlier, Elvira found out the truth, which stings a little, is that George wasn't the killer. It was actually Leonard. I'd almost wondered if Mal was in the car too, considering the whole situation, because she was like, right, I guess George came home after the fact and then like told Leonard like, no, I'll protect you, because he knew his brother had a like weak heart and wasn't able to like survive in prison. So it's like, right, Mal is the only other person that knows the truth, and now Elvira. And it's like, okay, because she was going on this whole tirade about he should not be forgiven, he's a terrible person, why should he be forgiven? And it turns out, no, he wasn't even, because even she's like, oh, because even later when she's finding out the therapist is super happy about it, she's like, I knew it. But it sucks that it was the wrong brother's funeral. It's like, yeah, it really sucks. It's like, an innocent guy died. You helped facilitate an innocent dude's death. I mean, granted, that wasn't on you. It was actually on the drunk driver. So you could still kind of be like, that was kind of out of my hands. But let's face it, you were directly involved. If you weren't chasing him and he wasn't running for his life, he wouldn't be dead. But like I said, that also plays into why he didn't kill Elvira, because he's not a bad dude. He would have been justified. It's like, this crazy lady showed up in my place and tried to like nail gun me, so I killed her in self-defense. But he didn't. He just threw down the weapon and ran, and that was his downfall. Because, I mean, for one, he left a weapon for Elvira to easily pick up and chase after him. I wasn't expecting her to immediately chase after him regardless. I mean, to be fair, he's seen her face now, so it's like, you gotta die. Because or you might get the cops involved. So it all worked out for her, because he needed to die regardless, because he'd seen her face. But now it's like, and the whole, you trying on multiple occasions to murder him with a nail gun. Yeah, it had to end that way regardless. But it's like, yeah, you could have prevented all that if you hadn't gone after him. So she knew something from the beginning didn't quite feel right. But once again, it's just, all right, like, she needs to find the reason, any slight thing that proves the narrative she's created, or the narrative that she believes that will help fulfill, like, oh, yep, he's a terrible person. Yep, I get to kill him. Yay me, type of situation. So we have all that. Then there's the other elements of the episode we have to kind of start weaving in. First and foremost, we have pretty early on in the episode Mal going through Emerson's computer, which I'm like, why did you leave your porn tabs open, my dude? Never. I mean, to be fair, it's like, you're around your girlfriend, so I mean, I don't even know if he described her as his girlfriend. The person you're in a situationship with, I guess. But yeah, like, she saw messages between him and Elvira. It wasn't anything necessarily flirty, but it kind of showcased for her, like, oh, you kind of have a thing for her. Elvira kind of, because Mal has been oblivious to, like, it was pretty clear that she had a thing for, but like, for Emerson, but Mal just kind of like brushed it off when Elvira was like, no, I don't. Like, she just kind of took it at face value, and so it kind of rubbed her the wrong way. Because she's like, I know you're obviously into him, But it's also like, right, you're smart, I'm not. It's like, no, you're beautiful, you're gonna have sex with him, I'd choose sex over a Pulitzer any day. And she starts laughing, and then Elvira's like, she's laughing because she doesn't know what a Pulitzer is, and she's just pretending like I said, like, because she thought I think the justification's supposed to be like, Mal's supposed to believe like, I don't know what a Pulitzer is, oh, it must be like some witty joke that she's making, oh my god, you're so funny. It's like, it's like you're going above and beyond because you don't know what a Pulitzer is. Then you weave that in with Emerson and Huey, where we find out that because Emerson tried to play coy, he did a forgery from Maria to make it seem she left a sticky note, because he's like, oh yeah, George, I'm writing. I'm looking at this old obituary for the father and daughter, and I'm trying to get the inside of the person, because he was trying to use this as an excuse to write some write up about prison reform and kind of stuff like that, and was using this as an opportunity to try and get Huey to admit to hiring Maria and like how much he really knows and everything. But after the little back and forth, Huey figured out like, all right, I know you know, stop trying to be cheeky. So what his connection with Maria is that they were having an affair and he loved her. In fact, we find out the truth behind the story. So it turns out Mallory did in fact steal her bag. I was like, was this really about a bag? But Mallory did have it later on. So I was like, there was some truth to what Ward said. Well, it turns out in actuality, Huey blames himself, because he's like, I'm the reason why she's dead, because I paid Mal to steal her bag, because I wanted it to be use it as an excuse so she would have no choice but to stay, because he didn't want her to leave. And because of that, he put her in the woods where she ends up getting shot and killed. So he blames himself for that. And because of it, that's what this has all been about. He isn't covering things up. He's trying to get to the heart of this investigation. I guess he never wanted. Why did you ever work with Clive then? You were kind of shutting Clive down. Well, Clive was working on this in secret, but I'm pretty sure Huey knew about it, right? Because that's why later on he's like, oh, where's Clive's computer? But it turns out Emerson has it. He's like, damn it. So now they have to like ultimately work together. But we thought he was trying to cover up some evidence. I'm like, what was your role in all this? It's like, no, you were having an affair with her, and I guess you didn't want to obviously have that come to light during the initial everything, and that would have just made you look suspicious, and it would have put her on blast and would have put you on blast. So just to kind of save face for everyone in this situation, I guess that was his justification. Ocean gave him the gun last episode, and that's why I was like, I wasn't quite sure how he fit in all this, because I knew the gun came from Ward and everything, but I wasn't. But it's like, no, he was hoping to be one step closer to finding out what actually happened to Maria. And he starts piecing it together, because Emerson, because he has the police reports and stuff, the police searched not only the town, but nearby towns as well, to find out how many people had many guns, how many guns did people say they had versus how many were registered for their homes, type of situation. So they finally get that list, and it's not till he starts looking at, because I saw the last name quickly, I'm like, it seems like we're supposed to know that, because they're going out of their way to focus on the name, and then we see like, oh, it's the dude from the beginning, the deaf father at the beginning of the episode. And I guess I never paid enough attention, because didn't Home Dude die at the beginning of the season? I believe he did. I think that's because that's the funeral Tom and everything were at. Which is also interesting. I mean, it makes sense. It's her job but it is interesting. The first thing that came up was his obituary, obviously. But it was written by Elvira. But once again, it makes sense, because once again, she's the person who writes the obituaries. But it's still interesting, because that ended up being like the final piece, not final piece, but a large piece to the puzzle that Huey was in the process of figuring out. And so he ends up visiting Tom, and he's like, I know that gun, because the gun he saw in the photo, I think he finally correlated, because he has the gun, so I think he pieced it together like, oh, that's the gun that Mr. Quigley had. I remember that. It's like, wait, so this is the gun. And so he's like, yeah, I remember that gun because your dad took me hunting with it. And so, but when the police came to question you after her death, you said you only had 3 guns, but I know you had 4. So whatever happened to that? And as we know, it was stolen. And ultimately, as we find out, it was stolen by Ward. He took the gun he's like, right, I got my payment, and I'm just going to take this gun. I guess that's also another thing about why he was kind of referencing with Elvira about, like, you know, not letting certain things kind of define your character, because he wasn't just talking about her, he's talking about himself. He wasn't always the best dude. So, because even later on, Tom comes to Ward about it. It's like, yeah, so he's asking a lot of questions. I haven't told him anything, so you need to deal with this guy. Either you kind of deal with him, or I'm going to basically expose you, Ward, for all that you've done, because obviously you're in the middle of all of this in some shape or form. So was that all it was? Maybe there was. I feel like there was a little bit more, like Tom was trying to get something else out of Ward for it. I don't remember. But then we also had the whole Mal and Elvira situation come back around when previously Elvira had talked about Mal. It's like one of the good things. Other girls had like read like one page of the book I wrote when I was a teenager and ridiculed me or having a laugh about it. But you actually quoted some of your favorite parts for it. So yes, that's a good thing you've done for me. But then later on, there's this whole thing where Mal's kind of like, right, like, if I did something, would you forgive me? She's like, I would have to know what it is first. And it's like, oh, so you wouldn't. It's like, well, I mean, it depends on the severity. It's like, oh, you stole my dog versus, oh my God, you killed my mom. Like, you know, I mean, both are shitty things, but one is worse than the other. You know, so it's like, yeah, it is a case by case basis, because, and even Mal trying to like justify by being like, right, I can stop feeling as guilty as I do about it if you go ahead, be with Emerson and have sex with him. Either you do, and we'll just kind of make this we're even Stevens, or I can make it so that, right, I'm gonna go home, have sex with him, and you've lost your opportunity. And it's like, because for Elvira, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, you aren't really making this easy for her, because she also doesn't want to actually admit what the terrible thing she was. My thought was like, oh, did she not read your novel? And especially later on when she's with Emerson, she's like, right, let's go have a laugh. She's getting even more drunk, and she hands him the manuscript for the novel, and it's like, oh, like, just let's read this and have a laugh. Oh, it's terrible, blah 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 blah, right? I was like, is that what it is? Because I thought the big secret was, hey, I gave those girls your book and I was laughing along with them, but when I was around you, I pretended like I didn't, but it meant so much to you that's what I thought that was about. But I guess, like, because that was such a good memory for Elvira, just to kind of spite her and spit in her face a little bit, she wanted to take that and embarrass her in front of Emerson, because it's obviously you like him, and what would be even worse than like having sex with him is like laughing at your manuscript, because obviously this meant so much to you. But Emerson was like really into it, and to be fair, like partway through, Mal ended up passing out. So, but we ultimately find out what that terrible thing it was, because the therapy starts kicking in and Elvira starts remembering more, specifically around the time she was in her medication phase, where it's like it started dulling her and she lost good chunks of time. She tried to replicate that, going out in the woods and shooting bottles again to try and recapture that moment when she was on her meds, because she wasn't ever happy again, and the meds didn't help with that. So she was out there trying to shoot, and she kept missing. I was like, oh, did Maria just happen to walk by and you shot her? Still could be, because obviously there's still big enough gaps in her memory. So it could even be a thing of, yeah, she ended up walking past, and much like the deer, while Elvira ended up shooting and missing the last shot and hitting the deer when she was a kid, maybe this time while she was shooting, she ended up hitting Maria. I don't think it's a situation of she saw Maria and purposely shot her. I think it's meant to be poetically like the deer situation, like it was completely unintentional, you know? Or maybe on some level, like her head was thinking like, right, I killed that deer and I was happy, let me kill this person. But I think it'd be more poetic for it to be like, nah, it was a complete another accident, and it was dark, she was heavily medicated, so she didn't notice. But I think Mal did. Maybe not. Because it turned out Mal saw her passed out in a car overdosing, and Mal just ran away. And that's where Elvira's like, wow, that's the thing she was like, she wanted to be even with me about. So that's where I'm like, but she was also in the woods, and at that time she had the bag. So that's why I'm like, I don't think she found Maria's body or whatever. And I don't think, to be fair, they kind of lean into the whole like, right, she's not the smartest person, so she wouldn't put two and two together that she was also that she was in the area. Like, Mal wouldn't put two and two together like that. But I guess at the time she left Elvira because she was too busy running away. Like, hey, I got paid to do this. She probably knew Maria was in the woods after her, so she had to get away. She couldn't get caught. That would have been a whole issue. So it was a self-preservation thing of, oh, you're going through it, but maybe you're asleep. I kind of noticed the pill sit beside you, but I mean, she obviously feels guilty enough about it, so she knows, like, shit, I messed up, you know? Cause maybe that's why she like made such an effort to be even. Well, because I was like, they were already tight friends, but maybe they weren't as good as friends as Elvira thought, and maybe Mal overcompensated later on after that incident because it's like, oh my god, she almost died, and I could have done something for her, but I didn't because I was so busy trying to save myself. Like, I'm a terrible person, and she tries to overcompensate for that, and that's why she latches on and tries to be such a really, really good friend to her even now. But it's like, you know, that could be a justification, but like I said, I think it's just it just all derives from her own guilt. But that's what there's a part of me that was like, could Mal have been the shooter and she was framing Elvira, and that's kind of what she's really, really guilty about. But it's like, but that involves some criminal mastermind to like frame someone, and I just don't see Mal being that. Once again, they're leaning into the whole like, Mal's not the smartest, you know, she's not the sharpest tool in the shed type of situation. So, but this whole situation, now that having this memory restored, makes Elvira really mad. Once again, she doesn't have the full context of everything. I mean, she has enough of that to be very, very pissed, and now she wants to kill Mal. I knew, because they were already leaning into that element early on, not even just this episode, but a previous episode or something where she had referenced, oh, I'd never do anything to hurt Mal or whatever. Mal would never be on the other end of that situation, or my rage or my ire. But it's like, nope. She is now, and you're like all about killing her now. Once again, you're gonna look like Mal's never done anything super shitty. She's done like, you know, some criminal stuff, some like shady stuff, but nothing justifying you murdering her. But now it's like you have enough of a personal vendetta to go after her. So once again, you're going to use whatever flimsy justification you can. I mean, you're probably not even going to worry about the justification because you're just super pissed, and it's like, oh, I want you dead now, which is so interesting because, hey, that was your best friend, in fact your only friend, and now you're willing to kind of put her 6 feet under. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, and especially with the walls closing in with all this stuff, because Emerson reading that book that Elvira wrote is now, his focus is on Ward now. So he's going to be looking that direction. Now, I'm wondering, is he going to say anything to Huey? Because Huey is still a step behind, because Huey hasn't correlated to the person stealing the rifle from Tom and his dad was Ward, because Tom's in complete denial about there being a missing rifle, but Emerson's already made the connection because of the book Elvira had was writing, so, with the novel rather. Because even I would have never, because I categorize novels as, like, I would use those terms interchangeably. I don't think she's an idiot for not knowing the difference between a novel and a novel in the book. I wouldn't have I was like, is there really much of a difference? I just use those words interchangeably, but they are different words, so they could be synonyms, and some they get used as synonyms, but it's like, no, it makes sense that a novel would be different from a just quote-unquote book, whatever the case may be. Sets up a lot of really, really, really interesting things. I'm ultimately curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, second to last episode of the season, so this is where shit's going to really hit the fan, and it's going to be interesting to see what goes down, how it all plays out, and where it leaves us going into the season finale. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.